talk about the sustainability in forest sector in Hungary. So I think to start, let me introduce partly the Hungarian forest sector. The important numbers the figures we can see here. It is important that only 1/5 of the country is covered by forest land, according to the definition of the Hungarian forest law. But only half of these forests include native tree species like oak, beech, and similar indigenous species. And the other half is mostly plantations used tree species which are not local, and usually these plantations are used in short rotations. It's also important to mention that 95% of our forests are used for timber production, even if it is not the main purpose of the forest. So, and 90% of these forests are managed with even-aged foresting methods, which means that there are periods of time when there are clear-cutting areas instead of forest. The main purpose of use, of course, especially in the lower naturalness categories, 60% of the forests are mostly for timber production. The other 40%, rounded 40%, is for protective purposes, more for the first place. But as I mentioned before, timber production is possible on these areas also. The ownership structure is like a little more than half of the forests are state-owned, and of course the other part is some kind of private-owned forest land. Adam and Gabriela also told about the productivity of these forests, so I don't want to go into details. Which you can see here is the deeper green areas are our forests. You can imagine that in the mountainous or hilly regions, we have more natural forests, and in the lowlands and flat plains, we mostly have plantations. And let me talk about sustainability in forestry. So according to the Hungarian forest law, sustainable forest management can be anything which is done according to law. So for example, here you can see Robinia pseudoacacia plantations harvest in short rotational methods and complete clear cuts, which is sustainable according to the law. But according to the ecologists, the only sustainable way in some areas was only the intact forests. So all those forests which are not used. Of course, sustainable use of forest is somewhere between the two, I think. And let me show what is and how is now defined in the Hungarian sector. Now you can see the main principles of the Hungarian forestry strategy about sustainability. So you can see that the Hungarian state would like to maintain the sustainability in a multiple use approach. For example, the public welfare to the economic use of forests, also nature conservation. But to balance it, it really depends also on the sector, the other experts, policy. So that's why we are here mostly. It is also highlighted that to the climate change, we have to improve the adaptation of potential of our forests and to increase mitigation capacity of forests. However, also on this strategy, also principles lie down to improve viability of the forestry sector, which means more income mostly. But also there were some words on Adam's presentation about to increase the forest cover. Yeah, it's about to increase, and actually in the last 2 years there were significant increase on newly introduced forest land. However, we cannot see them in the statistics, unfortunately. But let me see, in the next year probably we have more clearer picture. Of course, now we are here, not the possibilities how we can develop the sustainability in the forest, of course we can, but in the best practices, we have also the basic principles of sustainability, which were really funded in the forestry sector hundreds of years ago in some cases, which are mostly focusing on the area and the volume criteria of the forest. Also, there are criteria as to how you can harvest the forest, which are really forestry production focused criteria. However, this sustainability in forest management is just develops further and further in the last 200 years. So we are now seeing all opportunities and developments in every decades. So we are here. And you can see, for example, in the Hungarian law, which is not completely common in all over Europe, that we have a minimum requirement of all forest categories in the Hungarian law, and there is obligations that it cannot be decreased, should be increased in the most of the cases. So if you change the forest cover there, it should be better than it was in terms of naturalness. However, this criteria is only focusing on composition of tree species and nothing else. So there are no monitoring on other biotical data or effects. Of course, there is a minimum criteria on deadwood, which is also not common in all EU countries. However, this criteria is rather low. It's 6 cubic meter per hectare. The forestry experts know that you can find in any of the forest which is not a plantation. And of course, there is this obligatory increase of permanent forest cover methods, which is, I think it's really important. It's in place on the regulation more than 10 years now. And you can see the development of the area of these forests where we have to apply permanent forest cover management methods. However, it is not significant. As I presented, the clear cutting and shelter wood methods are in place in more than 90% of our forests. It is really important to note, however, that we have a growing tendency of average age of the Hungarian forests. It's mostly based on some kind of sustainability criteria and how they work. And you can see these are the two most important sectors on the state, where we more easily implement sustainability criteria in the sector. On the left, you can see the state forest enterprises, and on the right, with the more, how can I say, intensive development, the national park directorates. You can see that this older percentage of older stands are growing in Hungary. However, as a nature conservationist, I think it could be grow faster, but of course, there are other positions. It's important to note that there are other sustainability criteria which are not implied within the forestry framework, but mostly on other legislation, for example, nature protection laws, or the implementation of EUTR and the forthcoming deforestation law. I would like to highlight here the local firewood market, as the Hungarian competent authorities really heavily focusing on it, based on EUTR legislation, but I think a bit overgone on it. And now some of their already applied practices are also included to the new deforestation law. So I think the direction is good, and we will see the effects in the future. Also, we have to mention the voluntary activities like subsidies for the private sector available for close to nature forest management. The voluntary certification schemes are also available for the Hungarian forestry sector. However, I think the effect of these certifications in Hungary is, how can I say, it's not so significant or invisible, we can say. For example, I just copied here an FSC certification, but if you check the license itself, it's about promotional material producing company, which is only marking promo stuff for conferences like this. So, but what is saying there, the mark is responsible for forestry, but it's nothing to do with forestry at all. So also there is to mention the demand side of sustainability. There is an operational support for renewable electricity, which cannot be provided to illegally sourced woody biomass, which was certified by the Hungarian authorities. And there is also a restriction on using block wood or higher quality wood. However, it is really hard to identify this kind of wood in the supply chain. And the implementation is probably questionable. So how I can see it, the biggest guarantee of sustainability of less use. If we use more of the forest, then the sustainability will harm more. I think it's really clear, and of course minor changes can be achieved, but if we reduce the demand, the sustainability will grow. Thank you for your attention.